It's a hell of a headline. For those that don't know, Alan Moore is widely considered one of the greatest like comic book writers ever, especially when in terms of like modern comic books, modern storytelling in comic books. He's the guy a lot of people point to, along with some others. But he is the creator of V for Vendetta. If you don't know V for Vendetta, the movie or the comic book, you at least know the mask. It's the ones that like Anonymous wears. A lot of people wear at protests. It's like the Guy Fox mask, all white, smiling kind of with the mustache. He's the one that kind of like really popularized that. He also created Watchmen, which was considered like one of the first and best like graphic novels, not comic book, almost like highbrow literature. And it was viewed as like a huge step. And a lot of people point to it when people say comic books are for kids. They point to Watchmen. So the fact that he's the one that's like saying this, it's kind of a big deal in that culture, in that subculture of comic books and superheroes and all this and whatnot. So I also did Batman the Killing Joke, which is again considered a giant like turning point for Batman comics and his character in general. He did lean into like more mature themes. So for him to come out and say this a little wild, but I know it's not like the first time he's expressed regret and concern about what he's like contributed to the general zeitgeist. Yeah, he said I'm definitely done with comic books, which he hasn't been a part of for like a long time now. So he took particular issue with how the demographic of the entire medium has shifted from young boys to grown adults, as he found it odd that hundreds of thousands of adults are lining up to see characters and situations that had been created to entertain 12-year-old boys. And it was always emphasis Moore's boys of 50 years ago. So that's a lot. I didn't really think that superheroes were adult fare. Uh, I think this was a misunderstanding born of what happened in the 1980s, to which I must put my hand up to a considerable share of the blame, though it was not intentional when things like Watchmen were first appearing. See, like I said, he's kind of like the godfather of this like whole movement of comic books taking a more mature tone, which opened up to even more mainstream appeal because it seemed more acceptable for older people to kind of like get into. And him arguing that the culture has kind of leaned into infantilization, he kind of has a point. Because if you look around the culture, man, who's lining up for these movies? Who's arguing about these TV shows online? Who's at Comic-Con lining up to take a picture with somebody dressed as one of your favorite heroes? Who's the one who's dressing up and going to these places? They're adults. But I don't necessarily think it's because comic books. I just think that people, like with all popular things, it's like you grow up with it. Like games, for example. Games weren't intended for adults necessarily. They're intended for kids. They were toys for kids. But those same kids grew up, and now it's a part of who they are. Like, it's part of the culture. It is the pop culture now because that's what we grew up on. That's what I grew up on. So I can't really put that blame on anything in particular. I think it's just more of kind of like the natural flow of things is what you loved when you were younger. You're not always going to love as an adult, but there's a good chance that you're gonna have that love for that same medium. And if that medium kind of grows up with you, which is what comic books and video games did, of course you're gonna have a bunch of older people still loving, following, and being obsessed with that same exact medium. And everything's still about the money. So of course they're still going to be aiming those products, that medium, to what makes money. Kids make money, but their parents spend the money. But adults spend the money too, even if it's on themselves. So of course they're gonna aim whatever they can at that demographic. They're gonna give them what they want. They call it fan service. But the point I think he's trying to say is that it's like a negative thing. And while I don't completely like agree, I for sure don't completely disagree. Because there is a segment of the community and of the fans and the people who follow these different mediums of pop culture and nostalgia and things that we grew up as kids is certainly stunted, I would say, in their growth. Just look at the rhetoric, man. Just look at the rhetoric around anything coming out with a superhero movie, show, a change to anything that they grew up with. Like, bro, it's become insane. It's become literally insane. Like, you have like these grown ass dudes who probably have very low social skills in person going so hard online for something that is essentially made up, imaginary. Like, I get it. You have a love for something. You love that product, that medium, that character, that whatever. But to take it to that next step and to like form like these online hate groups for something because it doesn't fall in line with what you want or what you perceive that medium to be and to have always been, it's a sign of being stunted in your growth as a human being. Like, at the end of the day, this is all imaginary. I mean, just look at the backlash that Little Mermaid has gotten. It's been insane, bro. It's literally been insane for something that is imaginary, fake. It's fake. I don't care what nobody says. Like, historically in the medium, yeah, it's always been a white, red hair. Well, when you say red hair, it's been a fair skinned character. Who cares? Like, who cares? Disney's the one that made the popular image of a mermaid. But fuck is a mermaid, bro? Like, who cares? Like, if mermaids were real, you really think they would look like anything that Disney created? Come on, bro. Like, I get not liking something and not liking how something turns out because I feel the same way about a lot of things and a lot of these properties. But to have it affect you to the point that you like need to go on these like 30-minute YouTube rants, go on to these news channels and like discuss how the culture is deteriorating because they changed like the race or the skin color of one of your beloved imaginary characters is crazy, bro. Like, back in the day, having an imaginary friend was frowned upon. That's basically what these characters are. These are imaginary characters that a group of people created and that you are assigning your personal connection to as the end all be all for something that was made up. It's crazy. Like, look at the backlash when they said Santa was black, bro. They literally went on Fox News and had a whole segment and argued about how Santa Claus is white. Santa Claus. Seriously. Like, what are we doing, bro? Like, we could have this conversation about literally anything in history for the end of time. There's a million examples of shit being whitewashed in history, but that's okay, right? Come on, man. John Wayne played Genghis Khan. What? That's a real person. Genghis Khan is a real historical figure played by John Wayne. So it's kind of like, where's the line? You have all this vitriol for imaginary things, but for real historic figures, it's okay. But the argument is always like, that was back in the day. I mean, come on. A million examples. So I kind of get where he's coming from, talking about like the infantilization leading to a precursor to fascism. I'm not saying, I don't think he's saying that like loving this stuff will mean you're going to become a fascist. No, but he's talking about like the online communities that form around these things that quickly and quite easily lead to hate groups and hate communities that quickly go from, I don't like this decision that you made about this character that I love as a child and still love as a grown ass person, to I hate this person. Or, I mean, just look how quickly it devolves into conspiracy theories, which leads to a lot of bad things that we've seen in history. So I kind of get where he's coming from on this one. I don't agree 1,000% because when he was coming up, obviously comic books were such a new thing, especially in like pop culture and main culture, that yes, it was geared towards kids, but it's the same thing with video games. They were geared towards kids, but we grew up and the medium grew up with us. So that hold is always going to be there. I mean, but the issue of where it kind of crosses that line and it forces you down like these weird ass like rabbit holes and groups that started with like this intention of coming together around this thing that you love, to let's exert all our hate about like decisions on imaginary characters, to this whole like conspiratorial level, which makes it even easier to like fall into these even darker holes. Yeah, so on that part, I definitely see what he's talking about.